City Matters.
Hello again. This is Rich Acritelli here on HMTV. I'm with my special guest, Chief Master Sergeant Jack Brehm from the New York Air National Guard 106 Rescue Wing and retired Suffolk County Police officer. Jack, we were talking about the perfect storm, about some of your training, about going 1,500 miles out in the Atlantic Ocean. At this time here, we had the first Gulf War. In Saudi Arabia was a huge staging area for all of our armed forces against Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi Guard, Republican Guard there. When did you end up going to that theater of operations?
I didn't get over there till 1993, and I was in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. And the war was pretty much over. We were just defending the no-fly zones in the north and the south at that point. Saddam could fly in the middle of his country, but they were protecting the Kurds on the north, and they were protecting Kuwait on the south. So there were hundreds of miles on the north and south end of Iraq that he was not allowed to fly, was not allowed to put up radar. And we would send fighters in every day to knock out any radar stations, mobile radar sites that he put up. And as rescue, we sat cocked on the sidelines in case somebody got shot down.
What were your responsibilities?
Well, again, it's the only thing we were sending in at that point into Iraq were fighter planes looking for radar sites and looking for other violations of the end of the war. But we were there to recover those fighter pilots should any one of them have to crash land for a maintenance reason or for if they were shot down.
Did you ever have any of those types of missions there?
No.
Thankfully,
very
right?
fortunate, yes. Fortunately for our air power, we're very effective in knocking out other people's radar systems and warning systems.
Now, after this deployment, where do you end up?
Then I moved up to Kuwait for a while, did deployments in Kuwait, and then I came back to the U.S. and I didn't redeploy back. Well, I redeployed numerous times for Northern Watch and Southern Watch went on for years. And then I would redeploy back up and do the Northern Watch side where we would station ourselves in Turkey. And then we would watch the northern end of Iraq.
Did you like the Middle East? Was it something that appealed to you?
I love the Middle East. If I had life to do over again, I'd probably be a little bit like you, a history major, because I can't get enough of it.
Well, you saw so much of it.
Yeah, and there's real history. Here I always say you got to find a building that's 200 years old. We put a plaque on it. Over there, you find things built in
thousands of years ago.
Thousands of years ago.
Now, what Air Force base in Turkey were you at?
Incirlik.
And that's a major.
That's a major hub. Yeah,
that's a major facility for us over there.
Yeah, we would deploy to other locations that we can't. I don't know if I can give out to this day. Where we had little substations, especially as a helicopter unit. Okay. We could fly somewhere, just pick a coordinate in the desert, and we could sit and be deployed there for a day or two, being closer to potential action.
Now, as you're heading closer to 2000, which career position or opportunity were you looking to take, to join, that sort of thing?
Well, right around 2000, I was in the classic military panic position, and that is, you can retire from the military, but you can't financially afford to retire from the military.
Here on Long Island.
Yeah, especially here on Long Island. So that's the grasping at straws, like, what do I do now? I've been a professional soldier for 20-something years, and I'm
How old were you?
44.
And how many kids did you have?
5.
5 kids.
Yeah.
Home.
Yep.
So now what job were you leaning towards?
I wasn't leaning toward anything. I was looking, actually, I interviewed to become a commercial diver on bridges and do maintenance and welding underwater. I was looking at being a paramedic. was working part-time as a paramedic in Manhattan.
And you had training at Stony Brook University?
Right. I went through Stony Brook to become a nationally certified paramedic. So I was teaching at Stony Brook at night. It's like part-time gigs, paramedic students. I was working in Manhattan as a per diem medic in St. Clair's Hospital in Times Square. And I was looking at scuba diving, and you're really looking forward to that second career because you can't retire at 44 for the rest of your life on a military pension. And the Suffolk County Police Department test came up, and I took that, and I was fortunate enough to score very well and get called by the Suffolk County Police.
Well, I know it's different, but what was that academy compared to the previous several other types of training? I mean, you already had it ingrained in you to do what you were taught and do what you were told to do and absorb things. Yeah. What was that like?
Well, they try and be a paramilitary organization, and they try and yell and scream. And as a veteran, and I'm sure every other veteran that goes through there, you're saying, yeah, it's comical.
Yeah.
They got somebody that's acting like a father figure, somebody that's acting like a maniac, somebody that's like the disciplinarian, and they all had their separate roles, and you can identify them immediately. And you say you can yell and scream all you want, but I'm looking at the clock saying, I know at 4 o'clock I go home.
I see my family. And
yeah.
Now, were there a lot of other recruits for the Suffolk County Police that were in the military?
Yes, because you do get points. If you were deployed to combat zones and you had the Expeditionary Medal, which I had, you got 5 points toward the test, which is a huge deal. The difference between a 90 and a 95 is getting hired and not getting hired.
Sure.
So.
And were you motivated? I mean, it's something different, right?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, you're a type A personality. It's an outside job. It's interacting with the public. And then I wound up working my way into a niche where I became I called myself a mini PJ, because I was still scuba diving for the police department. I was, still shooting a gun, still wearing a blue uniform. I was still acting as a medic. I was a tactical medic for our ESU, emergency service operators, right? And I was also stationed on Fire Island. It was very limited medical personnel, so I was a cop paramedic on Fire Island.
And you were some resource for them. I mean, coming out of all your training and experiences and being out on Fire Island with all that wildlife and kind of being a little ways from Long Island, right? You were a tremendous resource for them.
I said I was a round peg in a round hole. I fit right in, and they let me use all the skills that I've been honing for years and use them there.
Now, where were you 9/11/2001?
I left the military in September of 2000 to go into the police academy. I graduated the police academy in May of 2001. So I was only on the street from 4 or 5 months when September 11th happened. And I was extremely frustrated because, you're like a pro football player that trains your whole life and you want to play in the big game. And I felt I had left before the big game. So when I was offered the opportunity to come back and sign on for another 1.5 years active duty and deploy right to the Middle East, I did it immediately. So September 11th happened. By October, I was back in the Middle East.
Now, did the base call you? Did you have the leadership there, or through the command of the PJs? How did they get back in touch with you?
Well, to go backward, when I left my active duty position, my AGR position, to go to the police department, I stayed on as a reservist. So I was still a guardsman. So I was still doing a weekend a month and whatever days I could to fly, train, stay current and qualified.
Yeah, you were still present there?
I was still wearing a beret, and I was still a PJ, and I was still current and qualified. So it was a very easy transition for me to just take separation from the police job and go back on active duty, Title 10, for 1.5 years.
Now, 9/11 occurs. It's a very rough time. Where were you when the war started in Afghanistan?
I was in Kuwait the night we started the war, and I remember it was kind of an empowering position because we were in a lockdown compound. They gave us coordinates in the desert. We landed there. We started building tents. They started putting up security fences around us, and we built our own base from nothing. There was no existing facility where we landed. And I remember back then there was no cell phones. Computer time was very limited. They had full control over your computer time, and you got one phone call a week. So we were there, and they called us into chow hall one night, and we were eating our meal, and the commander says, I feel safe enough telling you this. He says, because I know you have no communication with the outside world, but we are starting the war at 4:13 a.m. tomorrow morning, and you are all going to be here in place, and, put on your real hats, because tonight we set our first alerts, get ready to do search and rescue.
And you guys operated out of Kuwait. Did you ever have any instances where any planes went down or helicopters or where you had to go into Afghanistan?
No, we always would go to other locations from there and then sit cocked and ready to go when fighters were in the box and the box was hot, which just means they're in enemy territory and areas where there is radar and they can be shot down. But once again, as the same in the first Gulf War, that first night we launched such effective strikes against their radar and their communication systems and everything. That war went very smooth, and our air power really showed itself.
But you guys, you always had to be alert, right? You always had to be ready to go on a moment's notice.
Oh, you're, as I said, apprehensive all the time. And we were, at that point, chemical warfare was a big deal. I mean, the sirens would go off, and you had 4 minutes to don chemical warfare gear, which is a charcoal suit and a mask, gloves, hood, booties, be taped up and ready, because at that point we did have the Patriot missiles, which were a great defense system for the incoming Scuds and other things that we predicted were going to be shot at us. But yeah.
Now, how long did you remain in the service for at that point?
I stayed the other 18 months, and then about 2003 I finished that active duty commitment, and at that point I separated completely from the Guard and the active duty, and I've been retired ever since.
So you retired, and then you went back into...
Right back into patrol. Got my police car the next day and started driving around.
And then what was your main job? I know you had mentioned it before, but where did you end up for a lot of your career?
Originally it was patrol, handling every 911 call like every other cop. But then I was fortunate enough to get into, with all my skills, which was scuba diving, which was being a medic, I got into the Marine Bureau, which I became a boat captain, and I would handle all on the Great South Bay of Long Island, if you're familiar, all the boating accidents, fatalities, and then we were also in charge of Fire Island, which we had to provide regular police enforcement for. That's the bars and the restaurants, and there are thousands of homes over on Fire Island.
So would that be like near Oak Beach, near Bayshore, Robert Moses?
Right.
Those areas over there?
Yeah.
So now you did a lot of scuba diving. What were some of the things that you came across?
Well, the main reason to scuba dive for the police department is to find proceeds from crimes, find bodies. So we would always be looking for guns, knives, or any proceeds from a crime. So one scuba dive, we came up with like 4 or 5 safes where somebody said, this guy's been burglarizing restaurants, and this is where he throws his safes. And people who were lost.
How did you get the safes out of the water? Just did you have like salvage ships come out there or anything like that? Or
no, fortunately he was throwing them off a dock, so it was very easy. We would just go down,
not in the middle of the Great South Bay or anything like that. Okay.
Unfortunately, the Great South Bay is on the average of 6 feet deep.
Wow. All right, so that's not too bad then,
No.
right? Now, how many years Suffolk County Police Department?
I was a Suffolk County police officer for 22 years. I retired with 25 because you could buy 3 years for your military service.
Now, what was your calling card to some of the places that you served at with the police? What did you kind of leave behind?
Well, I've never left the military far behind me. So the symbol of Air Force Pararescue is the green feet from the Jolly Green Giant, and that came from the Vietnam War with a pararescueman named Wayne Fisk got the first green feet tattooed on his buttocks, and that has become a tradition ever since. And the green feet came from the helicopter we flew was considered the Jolly Green Giant because it was huge, it was green, And they said whenever it landed in Vietnam, it would leave a huge footprint in the rice paddies or wherever it placed down. So we became, the Jolly Green Giant footprints for our symbol. So in every police department or building or boat I ever worked on, I stenciled those green feet.
Did you ever get any forms of trouble, or did people just know it was you? Or
it took a long time for people to put two and two together because I never had anybody associate with me when I was doing this, but somebody figured it out somewhere along the line.
You got to have a sense of humor too, and that was a large part of your life as well, was the military and the PJs and everything. Now, as you're retired, what interest in film were you tied to over the last several years that was made about the PJs in Vietnam and Medal of Honor recipient? Who was that Medal of Honor recipient?
Well, I became friends with a writer, director, producer from Hollywood, and he once asked me, he said, who's the most famous PJ? Who's the PJ you all aspire to be? Who's the guy you all talk about? And when I first got in, it was Bill Pitsenbarger, who was a pararescue and lost his life in Vietnam, rescuing some Army troops who were pinned down. And he was supposed to just lower a basket out of the helicopter, have the Army troops load their own casualties, and then hoist them up and treat them in the helicopter. But when it became very clear that they didn't know how to load somebody correctly, they were taking too much long, the helicopter was taking too much fire, he told the pilot, I have to go down there and I got to load these people if we're ever going to get out of here.
Yeah, he went into the field during the fight.
So he came down and these Army guys said, what is this guy doing? Like, we're in a living hell right here. And he's coming down into us when all we can think about is how to get the hell out of here. He came down and he kept loading up survivors until they said, we got room for one more person. Bill, you got to come up. And he said, no, I'm going to send you one more survivor and I'm staying. And I'm going to treat the guys that are down here because they knew nobody was coming back. He stayed on the ground. He was killed that evening.
And they ordered him out, right? They told him to leave.
Well, they gave him the opportunity and he refused to get on the hoist. So he's the guy we look at.
When did he receive the Medal of Honor?
It wasn't until years later. The Army group that he had rescued, the survivors, kept putting him in for the Medal of Honor, and it was getting turned down and turned down and turned down. But finally, there was a final pitch, and they really pushed forward and got together and said, listen, we got to get this guy the medal, and they did, and it didn't come until the late 90s, I guess, that he actually got it.
And the PJs, while it's very minimal in numbers, that also goes with Medal of Honors too, right? There's not many Medal of Honor recipients for that, so it's a huge deal for the PJ community.
Absolutely. So to go back to the original question, so this Todd Robinson, this director of Hollywood movies, said, wow, I got to write a movie about this guy. And he did. It took him years to get the rights and everything else, but he made a movie called The Last Full Measure. And it's a beautiful story of,
How many scenes were you in that film there?
Oh, he invited me there to be in the film, just to be dressed as a PJ, to represent myself, but I have no talking lines. It's not even a cameo. I'm just in the background guy, but I think I'm in there 3 or 4 times in the background.
Was that a little nerve-wracking for you, or was it just something different?
Fun.
It was fun there?
Yeah.
What actors were in that film?
Oh, gosh. William Hurt, Samuel L. Jackson.
I think Ed Harris.
Ed Harris was in there, yeah.
Christopher Plummer, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Did they talk to you? Were they?
No, we were pretty much told to stay away from the big stars, the big names, but they were mixed into us, the whole time, But it was a great experience.
Unbelievable experience. Yeah. Now, what's the things you like to do today? You're retired from both. What's some of your days?
Well, what it's always been is I've always been I've always had to stay in shape. I mean, it was mandatory in the military. You took PT tests every year. Police department, you have to stay in shape. I mean, So that's always been since I was 20 years old. I mean, working out every single day was a priority of my job. So I still run marathons, triathlons, I run Ironman, endurance events, last man standings. I run a thing called Hell on the Hill every year. I run 29:29, which simulates running up Mount Everest. And next month with a bunch of guys from the base, from the 103rd out in West Hampton, I'm going to run a ruck run, which is over 200 miles carrying a 20-pound ruck. But it's a relay. We're all going to step in and out.
And you do some biking as well?
I just biked across the United States with another group of guys, and that's pretty much my mainstay. Get up every day, work out, and then decide what I want to do with my day.
But now, how many grandchildren do you have now?
10.
10 grandchildren. Are they pretty active kids?
Of course, they're the 10 greatest children on the planet Earth.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm very fortunate that 2 of them live right next door to me. 4 of them live right down the street from me, and the other ones are all within a 10-mile radius, basically.
And they got a little glimmer in their eyes, right? Some energy to them and everything, right?
Yeah, I think I'm not the normal grandpa in their eyes. Like, they've seen what other grandpas are like, and I'm the guy taking them on hikes and the beaches and swimming and
showing them different things, right?
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Yeah, I don't think ordinary would be a key word to describe you, Jack. You know, and now with your wife, is there anything that you like to do?
Well, I'm very happy that traveling was the biggest thing I missed in the military. I said spontaneous travel to foreign places, and now me and my wife are into that. We're going to do a month in Portugal. We plan as many trips as we can, and we become quite the travelers.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you to Jack Brehm for his, his life here is unbelievable. What was the name of the book that you wrote? That
others may live. That's the motto of all of Pararescue.
That others may live. So if you get a chance, go on Amazon, go to your library, ask Barnes & Noble, and pick up that book. It's an unbelievable, very powerful book. And we thank you for coming down here to HMTV.
Thanks for having me.
Jack Brehm, PJ, Suffolk County Police officer, local kid from Shoreham who definitely did right.